but she remained shadowy and tentative, as if not wanting to step any closer to us. She would have to come more into focus before I could understand her communication, so I waited for another soul to begin reaching out. An uncle and grandfather soon followed and began communicating to the young woman. The messages seemed to me rather innocuous and mundane, but the young woman listened intently to their communication. As I related their messages, my own feelings began to creep into my thoughts. This young woman, with her bright smile and sweet disposition, didn't seem old enough to have sustained any substantial tragedy. I was quite mistaken. Before I could even finish the thought, my mind was interrupted by the words, "I'm ashamed." What? The words rang in my ears so clearly I thought they came from within the room. What? The young woman asked me, confused. "She says she's ashamed." "Who?" the young man asked. "Wait a minute," I told them. I listened more carefully to the soul communicating. She seemed to inch closer, as if testing the ground before her to make sure it was safe. "She says this is Mother, and she says she's ashamed." What I thought was water from the young woman's wet hair was actually the tears that came down her face in a sudden flood. "Ask her why this is happening," she pleaded, wiping her tears with the towel. "Let's let her go at her own pace," I cautioned her. The communication is always better when the souls are prompted by their own need to speak. The soul, who at first was so tenuous, now moved gradually closer to reach out to the young woman. She says to me, "This is my daughter. She keeps telling me to tell you she is so sorry. She is ashamed of her behavior on the earth." The young woman nodded in agreement, so I continued. "There is another female presence there with her, very young, a baby girl." She didn't respond, so I looked up to make sure she understood. As I caught sight of her face, I noticed that her eyes were as wide as saucer plates, and she looked terrified. The young man next to her put his head in his hands and began to cry. The soul asked me to continue, however, and she says, "I am still your child. You did nothing wrong." As the session went on, the soul of the young woman's mother told the difficult story of her own mental illness on the earth, her inability to cope with her daughter, and the neglect this young woman was made to suffer as a child. Eventually, the young woman married the gentleman seated next to her in the session, both literally to escape the dysfunctional houses they grew up in. Although they were just teenagers, they wanted to start a family right away and shower a child with the love they never felt they got as children themselves. A few months after they were married, they were expecting a child. A few months into the young woman's pregnancy, her mother passed on from the effects of alcohol abuse. The young woman's feelings of freedom from her mother's cruelty and madness gave way to an obsessive fear that she was destined to become just like her, thinking she would also fall victim to the same mental illness and alcoholism that plagued her mother's distraught life. She began worrying constantly that she would not be a good mother, and had terrible thoughts of history repeating the same circumstances she lived through as a child. No matter how much her husband tried to console and reason with her, the fear grew worse each day. One night in her 5th month of pregnancy, the young woman woke up in terrible pain. A few hours later, she had lost her unborn baby. I understand on many levels why it is so important for the souls to reach out to us and change the direction of our thinking. This young woman came to the session feeling she was being punished somehow, that God's way of protecting her baby from cruelty was to take it from her. She thought she killed her baby by not wanting it badly enough. The ironic thing is that no matter how rough a relationship this young woman had with her mother, she knew her mother was the only person who could be counted on to tell her the straight truth about why she was being punished, and whether God would ever allow her to be a mother. In the session, her mother apologized.